Good evening, and welcome to the third installment of Lethal Company Concepts. This series is a real fun one to make, so I'm glad y'all enjoyed the last two episodes. Apparently, Zeekers did too, because my son got into the big leagues. The Clockwork Angel made it. Well, probably. Too many of the ideas presented with the Clockwork Angel line up with the old birds that were added in the most recent update for it not to have at least been a little bit of inspiration for it, which I don't mind at all, by the way. I give express permission for Zeekers who take anything they please from these videos. That's partially why I'm making them. The other reason is money. If you aren't familiar with this series, basically I get a bunch of artists from my Discord server to draw some ideas for new creatures, scrap, tools, and areas that I may have. This episode is going to have a different format though. Today we're focusing only on creatures and environments, as today is the quadruple interior layout special. I have made 4 interior layouts, basically what the mansion is compared to the bunker, and populated them with a sprinkling of unique creatures to roam their halls. This one was real fun to make and has some of my favorite creatures that I've ever put into one of these videos in it, so I hope you enjoy. Sorry about the delay in production. Anyways, starting off, the first layout is actually an expansion on a past idea I had. If you remember last episode, we had the oceanic moon known as Cetus, where I stated that the interior layout for this moon was different, with water obstacles and flooded rooms being staples. However, I never really went in depth, pun not intended, with how it would work out. So let me remedy that with our first interior layout, the sewers. The sewers are found almost exclusively on Cetus, but can be found on March or Vow rarely. They are a series of slimy cement hallways and side rooms with a constant flowing current throughout the middle. Many of the devices made to contain and treat this brackish water have broken down, leading to intense flooding being a near constant. Mines and turrets are very rare here, but creatures like spiders, snare fleas, and brackens are quite common, alongside aquatic threats like the Ningyo outlined in the first episode of this series. Be wary you do not fall into that murky brownish water, as it might contain something that's been waiting for some time to gobble you up. The first creature to be found nearly exclusively in the sewers is a rather innocent one, the pearl crabs. Pearl crabs are small crustaceans that lurk inside of discarded pieces of scrap. They seem to eat mostly anything, from algae to dead things, as they slowly wander the damp halls of the sewers. Not only is their quote-unquote shell sometimes valuable, they also have the potential to hold a nice pearl of varying color inside their carapace. If an employee wants this pearl, they will have to kill the poor animal for it, though, and even then it's only a chance for it to have one at all. This pearl will sell for between 15 and 100 value depending on the shape and color, with pure white perfectly spherical pearls selling for the most. The pearl crabs themselves are harmless, and will flee upon feeling threatened. This can include an employee running near or by them, so you will have to sneak up on a pearl crab if you want its juicy loot. They are small enough to die to a single swing from any weapon, though, so if an employee is dedicated, they can easily get what they need from this little scavenger. The next creature is much more threatening, the muckodile. Poking its eyes up from beneath the murky water, these moss-covered crocodilians are quite the threatening sight, if you can see them at all, that is. The muckodile's primary method of hunting is to submerge itself almost entirely in dirty brown water, and simply wait with its eyes and nose poking from the surface for a prey item to walk by. If that prey item happens to be you, it will lunge from the water and bite onto you, putting a solo player into a stunned ragdoll state while they attempt to carry you into the water. If they are attacked while they do this, they will let the player go, but if they are allowed to carry the player back into the water, they will proceed to death roll them for immense damage, killing them in a matter of seconds. If they do fail their lunge or are attacked while carrying someone, they will instead sprint back into the water and flee, oftentimes finding large sewer tunnels that will allow them to find another room to wait in ambush. The muckodile is a terrifying predator for those that aren't expecting its attack, and will surely lead to a good number of jump-scared players. Interestingly, though, the muckodile doesn't only hunt humans. It will also hunt other creatures that are small enough, like brackens, spiders, snare fleas, and masked. So if you see a hiding muckadile waiting in ambush, it might be a good idea to lure one of those creatures within range. You'd be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. The final creature to be found exclusively in the sewers is a proper monster. In massive rooms, you'll occasionally find yourself standing on great catwalks or balancing on floating boxes or debris above a massive body of greenish-brown salt water. I wouldn't recommend falling in, though, as these great bodies of water are often inhabited by the hideous Mawface. This gargantuan descendant of the modern-day batfish is a deep-sea predator that is adapted for cave hunting. One day, one of these large-mouthed predators found its way into an opening in this facility and snuck into the pipe networks. Its descendants have been hunting these grounds ever since. Adapted for crawling through the pipe-ridden environment, the Mawface hunts primarily by swallowing its prey whole using its gargantuan mouth. If any player, or even monster, falls into the water, it is almost immediately consumed by the waiting Mawface for an instantaneous kill. When a Mawface is inhabiting a body of water, it can, of course, be spotted from above the water by tracing the ripples it makes as it occasionally surfaces. However, there is another way. One of the main activities in a Mawface's busy day is sitting still and emitting a deep rumble that can be heard throughout the sewers. This is likely an attempt to find a mate of some kind. I imagine it isn't easy for them, but perhaps when the sewers flood, it becomes a little easier to escape from their cramped pools and spawn. Oh yeah, speaking of which, don't stick around in a fully flooded sewer environment. You won't want to meet the Mawface in that situation. Anyways, that's all for the sewers. Our next interior layout is quite the nasty one, known only as the Carcass. It seems that whatever this facility once was, it looks to have fallen victim to quite the catastrophe, as a massive creature seems to have died right on top of it. Luckily, it looks as though the scrap that this creature swallowed over its lifetime is still valuable enough to be sold, so the employees might as well get their least important clothes on and a nice hose prepared for afterwards, because exploring the Carcass can get quite messy. The Carcass itself consists primarily of horribly uneven rooms made by burrowing scavengers and natural decay, occasionally with some hazards here and there, such as boiling pools of stomach acid that will eat through the employees' health, sharp bones which can easily cut them, or dangerous clouds of toxins so strong that even the natural filters of the masks the employees are wearing won't prevent them from suffering damage to them. A number of odd creatures reside within this great corpse, almost all of which are nearly inexplicable in nature. Well, nearly all of them are, at least. Our first creature is quite easy to explain, known as the gutworm. The gutworms are large grub-like scavengers that feast on the bounty of rotting flesh within the Carcass. They are opportunistic, feasting on anything that dies, but preferring fresher prey. More often than not, they simply serve as ambient creatures, spicing up the environment of the Carcass. But if an injured employee, say around 30% health or lower, walks past them, they will not hesitate to take the opportunity presented to them. Hostile gutworms crawl slowly on their 4 spindly limbs towards their prey before grabbing onto that prey and biting them hard, latching on as they slowly damage them by drinking their blood. The weight of the gutworm will also begin to slow an employee down. Each individual gutworm weighs around 30 pounds. All it takes is a simple shovel hit to send a gutworm running, and a second one to kill them properly. It's also important to note that if an employee hits a gutworm while they are passively eating, all the gutworms in the room will enter into their hunting mode. A threat to one is a threat to all. While mostly neutral, it is important to keep the threat of the gutworms in mind when one is traveling the Carcass. As the employees continue along their journey, they might find a curious thing in the lower layers of the Carcass. A cloud of noxious gas lingers in much higher quantities than the ones you'd find naturally spawning. This cloud takes up an entire room and seems to be emitting from somewhere. As it happens, that somewhere is our next creature, the Rot Heap. A pathetic lump of putrid flesh, the mindless Rot Heap lies fused to the meaty floor of some rooms, emitting constant sounds of sobbing as they release toxic gas from the gaps where their noses and mouths would be. The poisonous gas a rot heap releases will take its toll quickly, draining your health and impairing your vision at faster and faster rates as you stand within the cloud. The easiest way to deal with a rot heap is simply to kill it with a weapon, though they are quite tanky, taking around 5 to 6 shovel swings to kill. Once the source is dispatched, the toxic gas will dissipate very quickly. Though if you find yourself without a weapon, you could always try to make your travels quick through their gas. Sprinting through the room quickly will leave you with a negligible amount of damage taken, and should let you move along quite easily. The nature of the rot heaps is confusing, as the beast's shape represents a human who appears to have melted like candle wax under a flame. And their sobs are so oddly human as well. It's best not to dwell on it. Let's move on. The final creature of the carcass is, as is tradition, the most dangerous unique predator found in its environment. Known as the husk. Husks are fragile yet deadly hunters who stalk the carcass. They appear like the shed skin of a larger insect. Could it be the adult form of the plentiful gutworms that molted to gain wings before flying away from the body in search of other carrion to lay its eggs in? Perhaps, but something about this molt seems off. Could it be the fact that it's sprinting at you with bladed chitin arms outstretched, ready to slice you into dozens of equally sized meat cubes? Yeah, that sounds right. The husk's nature is hard to explain, perhaps some kind of unusual fungus occupying the shed skin of that aforementioned large insect. Either way, it's not too happy to meet you. The husk spends most of its time wandering the tunnels of the carcass, near silent in its wandering besides the occasional paper-like fluttering caused by its thin, chitinous skin moving quickly. When it spots a potential prey item, it will rush that target, eviscerating them in a matter of seconds with its bladed forelimbs, before taking a rest once the prey has been successfully taken out. Only a choice few have stuck around long enough to see what the husk does with its killed prey. But those few report that it appears to shove that fresh corpse into the hole on its back. Is that how it eats? If one wants to stop themselves from becoming fresh human sashimi, the easiest way to do so is simple. Smack it. Any blunt weapon will do. One hit from the shovel or any sign will cause the husk to crumple into a pile of useless twitching parts. Perhaps that's why they're so hasty with their killing. Either way, if one doesn't have one of these weapons on them, sacrificing a player is a good last resort solution to get the scrap one might need, as a husk will more often than not become much less aggressive while they are digesting their meal. Our next layout is much more inexplicable. As the employees enter the double doors into the facility, they might find themselves stumbling upon an abandoned reception desk in a room with white stucco walls. This is the gallery, an interior layout that is made primarily of long, well-lit hallways filled with various paintings and sculptures, with speakers in some rooms that constantly emit old music that echoes down the halls. As an employee wanders this area, they'll find rare and valuable scrap which appears to be on display. The deeper they go, the more they begin to notice. The music fades out and they begin to hear the shuffling of feet in the shadows. They notice that from the gaps in the walls and the corners of these rooms, there sprouts strange growths. Lumps of oily flesh grow and drip, sometimes even emitting a muffled version of that same odd music from within their fleshy bodies. Then they begin to find a series of dark under-construction rooms. No paintings rest on these walls, no music plays from these speakers. It's just flesh and darkness and a quiet feeling that the employees are not alone. Which is quite the correct feeling, because the employees aren't alone. In fact, they have a number of creatures, wholly unique to the gallery, roaming the area alongside them. Our first gallery-exclusive creature is the marionettes. While the employees wander into one of the many dark back rooms, they may end up being jumped by a gang of wooden posing dolls attached to long, thin strings that extend up into the ceiling. These dolls will attack ruthlessly, flailing their limbs as they float towards any employee unfortunate enough to meet them. They often attack in groups of 3 to 6, with each attack from a marionette dealing around 15 damage. They seem to come out of nowhere with not much of a sound cue besides the clacking of their wooden limbs, so a surprised and cornered employee could get shredded in a matter of seconds by a well-planned ambush. The marionettes wander exclusively in the darkness, as they seem to fear light. This also makes their main counter the flashlight. Shining a light on a marionette will make it go away. It takes 2 seconds with a regular flashlight and 1.5 seconds with the pro flashlight for a marionette to get pulled back up into the ceiling from whence it came as its strings are tugged. Be wary as you wander the darkness looking for extra scrap, as an unexpected gang of these miscreant puppets could quickly end your looting run. Our next creature is easily the strangest one that we've discussed so far, the Performer. Less of an individual creature and more of a stationary hazard, the Performer is a lump of disfigured, oily flesh stationed atop a display podium. Performers come in many shapes and sizes, but they always stand perfectly still, illuminated by an array of spotlights, continuing an endless, still performance, accompanied only by a muffled version of that constant old music that echoes throughout the halls, originating from some place within the performer's body. This performance seems to have enraptured quite the crowd, as each performer will have anywhere from 2 to 6 masked staring at it, completely entranced by the show put on by this strange blob of tumorous meat. The masked are completely harmless in this state. They don't even seem to notice you. However, if you interrupt the performance by, for example, making too much noise, shining too much light on the masked, or getting between the line of sight of the masked and the performer will let loose a horrifying scream and ball up into a more defensive, withdrawn pose. This interruption in the performance will cause every single mask that was previously entranced to turn instantly hostile, chasing down the employees that dared to interrupt their show. After about 2 minutes, the performer will slowly regain the confidence to continue its performance, causing every mask in the facility, including any potential new ones that were caused by the hostile mask catching a player, to return to the performer and continue watching the show. It's probably best to ignore these strange, fleshy monuments. Just enjoy the art from a distance. You wouldn't want to get too enthralled. The final creature of the gallery is also one of its most unstable denizens. As the employees find their way throughout the darker, emptier rooms of the gallery, they might begin to hear some odd sounds. Sobbing? Or perhaps laughing. Whichever it is, it will denote the presence of a creature that requires careful consideration in how one will approach it. Turning the corner, the employees come across the Critic, a hunched-over creature covered in tattered ornate clothing and golden jewelry. Multi-jointed chitinous limbs emerge from beneath the patterned cloth that hangs off its back, and its face appears to be covered by a theater mask. This theater mask will change depending on the critic's mood, either being a sinister, twisted grin or a tearful, tormented frown. Whatever the mood of the critic is, it will also determine its behavior. If a critic is sporting the sad mask, it will be passive. It will stick to the corners and walls of the rooms that it wanders, and will emit loud sobs as it holds its face in its strange insectoid hands. If attacked in this state, the critic will enter into a blind rage, sprinting at any employee they see and tearing them apart with rapid, deadly strikes, loudly wailing the entire time. Now, if the critic sports a happy mask, they will be wandering about jauntily, boastfully laughing every now and then. But upon seeing an employee, they will attack on sight, violently laughing the whole time as they tear their prey to pieces. However, if attacked in this state, they will stagger backwards, seemingly amused by the whole event, and will then become passive for the next couple minutes. A critic will spawn with one of these two moods, and will switch every 4 minutes. It is unknown what the critic's goal is with this erratic behavior. Perhaps they're simply searching for entertainment, judging every living thing with those empty black eyes, always searching for that perfect piece. But it's impossible to know. For now, just focus on not dying. Our final layout is easily the most desolate of them all. Found on any moon, This area is one made entirely of brutalist cement structures, forming long hallways that connect multiple large rooms. Streets run between these rooms that appear to have windows on them, tables, and other necessities that imply people used to live here. This underground concrete maze was at one point a city, housing hundreds if not thousands of individuals in this endless homogeneous tomb of residential life. This area is known as the District, and currently it sports no humans, though that was not always the case. The scrap you find here is almost unanimously valuable. Almost all of it are toys and tools, remnants of human civilization, now serving as nothing more than old commodities to be sold to meet your quota. The district only houses one creature, but it houses quite the number of that creature. As the employees wander throughout the ruins, they might begin to see shadows on the wall cast by figures they cannot see. After a minute or two within the district, these shadows will begin to appear as corporeal entities, figures with twisted proportions made of black shadowy material, each one with two gleaming yellowish-white eyes at the center of their heads. Many are taller than you, but many are short, as if they are, or perhaps were, young children. These are the Bright Eyes. They don't appear hostile at first, many of them are just confused, wandering down the long streets or simply staring at you from the corners of the rooms as you raid them for scrap. Sometimes hordes of them are so plentiful that they completely block off passageways, only clearable by shining a flashlight on them, which will cause them to move away and out of the beam. However, not every Bright Eyes is passive and avoidant. There are a notable number of them which are anything but. Some Bright Eyes appear to be twisted beyond recognition, with long, broken limbs in quantities much higher than what a human would normally have. Perhaps their bodies are bloated or shaped oddly, requiring them to crawl or drag themselves around on the floor. These truly distorted Bright Eyes are universally hostile, though many might stare at you for a few seconds before rushing you. A hostile Bright Eyes will attack by simply sprinting at you and flailing its limbs to attempt to bludgeon you to death. Almost every one of these hostile Bright Eyes has unique attributes, but each one has at least one weakness. Perhaps one is simply slow but does a truckload of damage. Perhaps one is super fast but has poor turning. Perhaps another struggles to fit through doors you can easily slip through. Either way, each hostile Bright Eye's shape is counterable in one way, but it will require the employees to be quick on their feet to avoid these invincible threats. On the bright side, the hostile Bright Eyes don't appear to have good memory, and will universally forget about any employee they were chasing after a few seconds of losing line of sight. They also don't appear to be able to hear or smell, only functioning off of sight. The Bright Eyes are full of surprises. If you stick around the passive ones long enough, you could even see hostile ones masquerading as passive ones, only chasing you if you stare at them too long. Or perhaps one of the passive ones could turn hostile if you invade its personal space for too long. This veritable army of wandering shadows is certainly something to be wary of as you wander this great, dead space. Perhaps the Bright Eyes are the ghostly remnants of the humans that once lived here, or perhaps they're just something that mimics what was once here. They can be observed to play with or hold on to pieces of scrap like toys. They can be seen sitting in chairs or wandering down pedestrian walkways, though many of them just seem lost and almost lonely despite their immense quantity. If they are what remains of the humans who once lived here, what of the hostile ones? What caused them to grow to such horrifying shapes and display such awful temperaments? Perhaps 100 lifetimes of wandering lost and lonely amidst the ghosts of all you once knew simply causes something within you to break. Or perhaps they were always just like that. Ugly spirits who use their current predicament as an excuse to cause the pain they always wanted to in life. It's certainly not a pleasant thought, but luckily, your job isn't to contemplate the origins of every sad beast you come across. Your job is to grab scrap and get out with your head still attached to your shoulders. So get out there and do your job. You wouldn't want to end up joining these poor souls, now would you? And those are my ideas for some Lethal Company areas and creatures. Hope you all enjoyed the third installment of this series. I'm not currently planning to do a fourth, but if this video does well, I might just come back around to the series in a month or two. Hard to say. Let me know what you think. Thank you all for watching. As always, Zeekers, my ideas are yours to use if you truly wish to. Or if you're watching at all, I suppose. Click the red button or I'll make a creature that specifically shows people that one unflattering middle school picture of you that you thought nobody knew about. Yeah, that's what I thought. Anyways, bye. See you all next time.